Welcome back. We are 3 teams away from finishing, going over every single team. We started this back in late June, I think, to kind of get ahead of things. Here we are, less than 2 weeks away from the football season starting, still recording. Buccaneers. Again, this is a 2024 fantasy review. All the numbers, stats, points per game, ADP, all that stuff's in half PPR. We are recording this on August 25th. Although I don't really see much changing with the Buccaneers between now and then. I think they already played their last game, or either that or they're going to. Yeah, they've already played their last preseason game, so shouldn't really be much changing here. And let's just get into it. The Bucs surprise team won the division. I remember talking about the Bucs last year, and everyone's like, "Oh, they're gonna be the worst team." And I was kind of like, "They have a lot of players on this team that like won a Super Bowl a couple of years ago, still on the team."
Yeah,
Won their division, won a playoff game, took the
I
Lions.
think they rebuilt their offensive line. They were a little thin there. They got drafted some guys, and they had decent their defense. Some of the there's some older guys, but they did a nice transition. They made a nice transition.
They kind of feel like they're a little bit in that no man's land. Like, can they really win a Super Bowl? But they're also not going to be that bad, But again, they won their division. They beat the Eagles in the playoffs. They were tied with the Lions heading into the fourth quarter of the playoff game. Still don't know why they didn't call timeouts on that Jared Goff kneel down. They would have forced the Lions to kick a long field goal, and they were only down by 8. Still don't know what was going on there. You got to give yourself a chance, whether it's a 1% chance or not. But anyways, we're talking fantasy here. Baker Mayfield is the quarterback. They did a very, very, very smart thing in how they formulated and made Baker Mayfield's contract. This is what the Giants should have done with Daniel Jones. So you had Baker Mayfield, who came in as a rookie, looked really good. I think he set the single season rookie touchdown pass record before Herbert broke it. And then he kind of sucked after that. He sucked, and then he was good again, and then he sucked, and then he bounced around from the Panthers, and he sucked, and then to the Rams, and then he sucked. And then he looked good last year. He probably had his best season of his career. So what do the Bucs do? They sign him to a deal where they're not really paying him that much this year, and they can get out of it before 2025. So if he sucks, see ya. We don't need you anymore. If he's good, you kind of have a bargain. Like in terms of what the going rate for quarterbacks these days, if Baker Mayfield throws 30 touchdowns again, or close to, it looks like he did last year, you have a bargain in that sense. Like really, really smart. It's exactly what the Giants should have done, but they didn't. Like, okay, it's basically saying, prove it to us one more time before we give you the big stuff. But that being said, for fantasy, I know he was good last year. If you look at his total points, I think he was like QB 10. That's because every quarterback was hurt. He was really in points per game. He was more of a low end QB 2. He was 19th per game. That's kind of what I expect him to be again if he repeats. He's in that Derek Carr, Geno Smith range of like, I'll pick him up and start him, when I need him during the season, but beyond that, I'm not really that interested. Any interest in Baker?
No, Geno, friggin' Derek Carr. I mean, that's in the category, that he sits right now. So, he was top 10 last year. I know you just mentioned that. So
yeah, in total points
by accident.
Any quarterback that played 17 games last year was in the top 12 essentially, because everyone got hurt. It's just helps. What's that?
I said it helps having a guy available every damn week. Instead of having to pick somebody up and all that other stuff. So
he was great last year. Like Baker was good last year. You look at his game log and it's like, okay, I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games, and one of them was week 18, so we don't even care. 4 games of the 17 that matter where I was disappointed. I'd say of those 4, 2 of them kind of killed you, and one of them was like, it was 11 points. Maybe it didn't kill you. It's not great. So you're disappointed. Like that's valuable. Like, and yeah, he was healthy. It's just, again, if everyone stayed healthy, he would have been more like QB 19 per game, and you wouldn't be starting him. It was just we're starting him because he's there and he's available. So I just don't know if he can get much better than 4,000 yards and 28 touchdowns. Like, do you really think he can get much better than 28 touchdowns? 4,000 yards and 28 touchdowns. Do you think he can get much better than that?
No, I think that's, about where his happy spot's at.
Yeah. Which is a streamable guy in week 8 when your quarterback's on a bye, So, Rachaad White came onto the scene, was awesome. A little bit skeptical in terms of, can this guy really, can he do it? Yeah. Can he do it? Can he take on the full load? He's not very efficient. You look at his yards per carry. I think he averages 3.6 yards per carry in his career, which is not great. He is very good at catching the ball. And he was like, me and Brian came up with a name. We were calling him poor man's McCaffrey, but then that was a little bit insulting because the guy was like a top 5 running back. So it was just like a bargain. It was like a discount McCaffrey or a bargain McCaffrey, I think is what we called him, something like that. He was 7th in points per game and 14th in points per game in half PPR and 7th in total points. Right? There was no competition, no one to take from him. So he got everything, 270 carries and 65 catches. Now, 270 carries and not getting 1,000 yards, that's a little tough. But he also had what? I think 8 touchdowns, 10 touchdowns. So I don't know. I like Rachaad White. Just you tell me, do you want him as potentially your RB1, round 3, RB 13th overall? Potentially as your RB1. Are you comfortable with Rachaad White? You think he's going to repeat what he did on a good team who, just not so efficient?
Well, I'm just thinking, just looking at the player, it doesn't excite you and everything else. And, but if you draft and you get 3 really good wide receivers, and then this guy's going to be your RB1, then I'd say, yeah, it might be all right. But I don't know, round 3,
end of round 3. So that your scenario could work if you have if you're picking at the end of the round.
right?
So,
well, that's the way I envision it. Picking them. Pick 34. Wow, that's. I mean, he's not lights out as a a running back. He catches a lot of passes and stuff. And
no, he's not. He's 3.7 yards per attempt, 3.6 last year. That's really bad. Like, you want to be at 4 at the worst, like
he played a full season though.
Yeah. My only concern is that if he continues to average 3.6 yards per attempt, do they try and work in Bucky Irving, who's probably the RB2 now? By the way, Bucky Irving caught like 60 passes last year in college, so he can catch passes too. But I'm kind of okay with Rachaad White. I think he is going to – I think sometimes we overthink things, and like sometimes there's players who are just not super efficient, but they get the workload, and that's all that really matters. Joe Mixon comes to mind. Leonard Fournette comes to mind. Guys like that. Najee Harris comes to mind. So.
Comparing Rachaad White and, I'm just looking at I'm comparing them to Travis Etienne. One Etienne had 267 carries, Rachaad White 272. Etienne had 1,008 yards. Rachaad White only had 18 yards less. So you could compare him to Etienne a little bit, Caught more passes than Etienne. I mean, if you get a repeat performance,
oh, you're ecstatic.
huh?
You're ecstatic. You're Yeah, that's what you want. You
Yes.
definitely want it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I'm not sure how Bucky Irvin's done in the preseason. We don't get a lot of, I don't know, Buccaneers news and stuff like that. So I don't know if the guy's doing okay. All you can do is look at box scores, see if he's even playing or if he's injured or whatever. And I don't know. But Bucky Irvin, he was from Oregon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's pretty good back. So
He's he's been looking good. I know he's been looking good in practices and stuff like that. So he is seemingly the RB2 for this team. Real quick on Rashad White. So basically, here's your decision. Let's just say you're picking at the 11th or 12th pick. You've gone wide receiver, wide receiver. So you're gonna go running back with your third pick. It basically comes down to Rashad White, James Cook. If you want to throw in, mix in Walker and Kamara, you can as well. So let's just start there. Rashad White or James Cook, who are you taking?
probably Cook, I think.
I think so too, but it's
Yeah.
tough. I think I lean better off. I'm more confident in the Bills' offense. Rashad White or Joe Mixon?
Rashad White or probably Mixon.
I think so too. Okay, Rashad White or Kenneth Walker?
Ah, boy, Rashad. Yeah, I might do Rashad White in that case.
Okay, then Kamara. You got Kamara or Rashad White?
Probably Rashad White.
Yeah, so he's in that mix of I like that group of running backs a lot. Which again, I keep saying it. I might start off 3 wide receivers and be okay with it, but yeah, I think I generally agree with you. But it's interesting. Like I can see an argument for all those guys over Rashad White. So I think that's what makes it even a little bit tougher if you are going to go running back. Like I can argue James Cook, Mixon, Kenneth Walker, Kamara. I can all those guys. So, but yeah, Bucky Irving, he's a name to know. Don't know if you should be drafting him, but definitely a name to know if something happens to White. Mike Evans, sometimes players reach that category of, I know they're getting old and I know they've been in the league forever, but they literally produce all the time. So I'm just like, sometimes I take the stance of like, I'm just going to keep taking these guys until the wheels fall off. And then when they do, I'm not going to try and predict it when that year is. I'm not going to try to predict when Frank Gore's done or Steven Jackson or Derrick Henry, because
sometimes you can see it coming though, and we haven't. I know where you're going with this, and we haven't seen it coming yet with Mike Evans, and they just committed to him for another couple of years with a big contract.
Yeah, so I'm saying
Mike Evans was packing his bags and leaving. He said, he was out when there was a story on the first day of free agency. He was out with his wife, and they were talking about where are we going to go and all this other stuff. Tampa Bay came in and gave him a contract and wanted to keep him. So they still believe in him and everything else is what I get out of the story. So,
well, yeah, and I'm saying like I'm not trying to predict his age and when he's going to fall off. I'm just going to keep taking him. I'm going to keep taking him, and when he dies, he dies. When he falls off, he falls off. The dude was 8th in points per game last year, wide receiver 8. I remember last year he was being criminally underrated, and we talked about it. Like, why is Mike Evans going in round 6? He's played with every quarterback you can throw at him, crappy ones, by the way, and he puts up 1,000 yards and probably double-digit touchdowns. To your point, you could argue that last year was probably his second or third best year in his career. Last year was. Yeah, he had 1,255 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 80 catches. That's tied for the most second most touchdowns in his career and third most yards. So he has the connection with Baker. They're going to keep doing it. They're going to keep going to him. He's going to put up 1,000 yards. He's about to tie Jerry Rice in most consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. He already has the record for most to start your career by a lot. But he's about to tie Jerry Rice for 11th most 1,000 yards, 11 straight 1,000-yard receiving seasons. I'm just going to keep taking him. Like, that's pretty simple,
Yeah,
It's pretty
I
simple.
mean, we try to predict demise and stuff like that, and and it's based upon age and stuff like that. But there's some guys that are, they got Superman capes and stuff like that. Mike Evans is damn good wide receiver, and
Yeah. The greats can play into their old, like they really can. If Larry Fitzgerald had like a top 10 season when he was like 32 years old, he led the league in catches or something.
yeah.
So he just turned 31, Mike Evans, like 4 days ago. So it's not like he's a young 31. I'm fine with it. He is going a lot higher though, round 3. That's the nervous part, I guess. But I'm totally fine with it.
Yeah, no one's predicting the drop off this year. So
Nope.
they went, we screwed up,
Yep. Chris Godwin is an interesting one. If I were to ask you, how many more targets do you think Mike Evans had versus Chris Godwin? Like, what would you say?
Well, I'd probably say they're pretty close, but maybe they'd be 10 or 20 targets apart.
It's interesting that you said they'd be pretty close, because I think most people would think they're at least 20 targets apart, which I think 20 is, that's pretty significant. He had 6 less targets than Mike Evans, 130 targets. Catches, I think he had more catches than Mike Evans. Chris Godwin had 1,000 yards last season. He literally did what he did, or very similarly to 2022, where he was, 20th per game, except he caught a lot less passes. That's it. 20 less. That was the difference. Here's the thing with Chris Godwin. They played him on the outside last year. When he was really good, they were playing him 65, 70% of the time in the slot. And you get easy catches in the slot. Last year, he played 30 to 35% in the slot. You look at his catch percentage, 71, 77, 77, 73 for 4 straight years, over 75%, well, most of them. Basically average 75% catch percentage. Last year, 64%, because he was playing on the outside. And he's just not really built to be in every, out there 70% of the time. He should be out there in 2 wide receiver sets, 3 wide receiver sets. Chris Godwin needs to be in the slot. That's what they're going to do. They're going to move him back to the slot. I think Chris Godwin's one of the biggest bargains in fantasy this year. Round 7, he's kind of like Evans last year. I think he's going to do exactly what he did last year. He's going to get 120 plus targets. I think he's going to catch more passes. If he gets just 3 more touchdowns, if he goes from 2 to 5, which isn't crazy to think, he's a top 20 guy. So I think he's a huge bargain. I think people are underrating him a little bit. I'm in on Chris Godwin in round 7. I love it. I think he's going to be a top 24 wide receiver, and he's being drafted as wide receiver 33. So that's my Chris Godwin. Go out and draft him spiel there. Do you agree or disagree with me there?
No, it's hard. It's hard to disagree with that. People look at their stat line now and they see 3 touchdowns or 2 touchdowns. That kind of, throws some shade on that, but as far as being a productive wide receiver, and was it this past year that he came back from a major injury, or was it the year before? So, but anyway,
the year before.
Yeah, and I mean, he did okay. So, I mean, Godwin's a guy, that pay attention to.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was 2022 season where he was coming back from the ACL. So, yeah, I think he's just severely underrated. So I'm in on Godwin. Not much else to talk about in the wide receiver room. I think Jalen McMillan's a good player, good for dynasty. He's a rookie, 3rd-round pick. I think he's going to win the job. I think Trey Palmer, who's kind of their wide receiver last year, also got nicked up. I think it was those two kind of competing. I like McMillan. If something happens to Evans or Godwin, McMillan's a name to know, but really hard to see something happen without an injury to those two guys. And then there's Cade Otton, who I think is a good, solid tight end. Not for fantasy necessarily, but just like a good tight end. He's in that 40 to 50, 500 to 600 yard bucket of tight ends. Once again, if something happens to Evans or Godwin, I'm interested. But he's going to be behind Evans and Godwin for sure. He's probably going to be behind Rachaad White in targets. So he's probably fourth on this team in targets at best. To me, he's a streamer at best. Anything on those players that you want to add?
Not really. I think you pretty much nailed it there on the tight end.
Yeah, I think we just did Seattle, and they're very similar teams. Their quarterbacks are streamers that I don't want to draft, that I want to start when my QB's on a bye week. Their running backs are players that I think are going to be good this year. They have two good wide receivers that I'm excited about. A tight end that I think there's some upside, but I'm not going to be drafting him. So, but that's it. We got two more teams, Titans and Commanders. Hope you guys enjoy that and getting close to the season. So we will see you all in the Titans video.